Hi everyone, I hope that you are all doing well. Today I will be doing my third virtual reading for you all. I really enjoy making these videos for you and I hope that you guys enjoy watching them as well. So before we get started today, I wanted to ask you some questions to help introduce the book that we're going to be reading. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is an enemy? So take a second to think about what is an enemy. And how do people act when they are your enemy? What type of behaviors do they show? So I said that an enemy is somebody that is not very nice, and that's somebody who doesn't want to be your friend. So think if you have any enemies, and if they're still your enemies. So sometimes when you get to know a person, you realize, oh, they're not my enemy, I actually want to be their friend. All right, so that's sort of the focus for today's book. So the book that we are going to be reading today is called Enemy Pie. It is written by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara King. All right, so that's the book we're going to be reading today. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to make a prediction about what we think the story is going to be about. So take a look at the cover and make a prediction about what you think the story is going to be about. So I said I think the boy on the front cover is one of the main characters or one of the key people that are going to be in our story. And I think that this is a pie that he made for one of his enemies. And I can tell that because it says, "For my best enemy." All right, so this is a pie that he made. So take a close look at the pie. And does that look like a normal pie that you would make? I see some worms in it. I see some leaves, some bugs. So that doesn't look like a normal pie. It has all gross things in it that you wouldn't want to eat. So that definitely isn't the type of pie that I would make for my friend. And then also, I think that this boy on the front cover is going to be the narrator of our story. So a narrator means it's the person who tells the story, all right? So that's what I think, but we can wait and see when we read and find out. So we looked at the front cover. Our next step is to look at the summary that is on the inside flap. So see, this is the flap of the book. It's on the inside flap. So it gives us a preview about what the story may be about. All right, so I'm going to read that for all of us. So it says, "It was the perfect summer, that is, until Jeremy Ross moved into the house down the street and became enemy number one." So we found out already that Jeremy Ross is the enemy in this story. And it says, "Luckily, Dad had a surefire way to get rid of enemies. Enemy pie." All right, so that's what the cover told us, right? It says, "For my best enemy." So that's the pie that he made for Jeremy Ross, who is his enemy. But one of the secret ingredients is spending an entire day with the enemy. In this funny yet endearing story, so endearing means cute, one little boy learns an effective recipe for turning an enemy into a best friend. So an effective recipe is something that's really good. But it says that it turns an enemy into a best friend. I wonder how that happens. I wonder if Jeremy Ross will start off being his enemy and then will turn out to be his friend. And then it says, "With charming illustrations that bring to life the difficulties and ultimate rewards of making new friends, Enemy Pie serves up a sweet lesson in friendship." All right, so that was our summary of the book. So that tells us a little bit of what it's about before we get to reading. All right, so the next step is I want to make a prediction if we think this book is fiction or nonfiction. So remember that fiction means the story is not real or that it's pretend, and nonfiction means the book tells a true story. So take a second and make a prediction if you think the book is fiction or nonfiction. So I said the book is fiction because you can see the picture sort of looks like a cartoon, and I think it's going to be a fun, silly story about making friends or what it's like to have an enemy and what the pie plays a role in the story. All right, so I think it's fiction. So the last step that I have created for us before we start reading is I want to review some vocabulary words, because some of these words in the book can be a little tricky. So I made these fun little word cards to help us practice our vocabulary terms, okay? So it's important that before we start reading, we make sure we understand the words that may be a little tricky. So I've already done that for us. I've already gone through and picked out some of the words that I think may be challenging. All right, so the first one I have chosen is trampoline. All right, so you can see the word is in blue, then there's a definition and a picture to help you understand. So a trampoline is something you jump on. So you can see there's a person jumping on the trampoline. All right, so typically you can do it outside. If you have a small one, you can do it inside. I know I had a small little one that I used to jump on. The next word is enemy. So we've already started to talk about this word, but an enemy is somebody you really don't like. All right, so that's a picture of somebody who, I think it's just to help you understand that an enemy is somebody that you don't like. The next one is recipe. So something that tells you how to cook food. So if you have a recipe book at your house, it has all of the different types of food that you can make, and it gives you the instructions or ingredients of what may be inside. So I know my mom has a recipe book, and say I'm making apple pie, for example, I need to look at the ingredients and what steps I need to take in order to make the pie. So it's pretty helpful. The next word is squint. So it's to close your eyes halfway. So see this girl squinting over here? So can you squint your eyes? It's like when you close your eyes so that they're almost shut. So sometimes you squint your eyes either to help you see or because the light is too bright. So if you've ever been outside when it's really, really sunny outside, sometimes you need sunglasses or else you'll start squinting so much because it's so bright. The next word is disgusting. So many of us know this word. It's really gross, nasty, or yucky. So you see that little creature is disgusting, right? So think of something, whether it's food, that you think is disgusting. So I think seafood is disgusting. I don't like it. So think of a food that'll help you understand that word. Then we have the term buzzer. So it's a bell that rings to let you know how much time has passed. So if we're thinking about cooking and ingredients, a buzzer is something that will help us when we're cooking an apple pie, for example. So if I set the timer for 30 minutes, the buzzer will go off in 30 minutes and it'll tell me that it's done. The next term is boomerang. So that's a picture of a boomerang, and it's a curved stick you throw that comes back at you. All right, so if you've ever had a boomerang, you throw it outside, and if you throw it correctly, it should come back at you. The next one is ingredients. So I already talked about those. It's things you need to cook something. So if I'm making my apple pie, I obviously need apples, I need a pie crust, I need sugar, cinnamon, all of those things to make it nice and yummy and tasty. The next thing is poisonous. So it's something that is bad for you. So that's a picture of something that's poisonous. All right, so obviously you don't want to eat or drink anything that is poisonous. So sometimes harsh chemicals are poisonous, and you really don't want to take those in. The last word is delicious. So many of you may know this word as well. It is yummy or good tasting. So that's a picture of ice cream, because I think ice cream is delicious. All right, so I think it is time to finally get to reading our book now that we have established some background knowledge, we have reviewed some vocabulary, and we made some predictions. So while I'm reading, I want you to think about what lesson the author is trying to teach you, since that's the focus of this book. So think about a lesson that you could learn. All right, and let's get to it. So, enemy pie. So you can see this is our first picture that we see. It looks like the boy and Jeremy Ross. They're smiling though. They look really happy. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. So those are those pictures. You can see him playing baseball. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. So Jeremy Ross is the first person on his enemy list, right? And then you can see he's in his treehouse, and he made a sign and said that Jeremy Ross is not allowed inside. So you can tell that he doesn't really like him. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of enemies. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. So you can see there's some faded writing. It's kind of hard to read. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Remember the word squinted? Where see how he's kind of squinting his eyes? Because he's trying to read it. Enemy pie, he said. Satisfied. So satisfied means you're happy. So we just found out that Dad has a way to get rid of the enemies, and that is with enemy pie. You may be wondering what exactly is an enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. So a secret, obviously, we know is something that you don't want to tell anyone. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kind of things, disgusting things, remember something that's really gross, would I put in a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. So all those things that he just listed seem to be on his pie, right? The worms, the gum, the leaves, all of that stuff. So Dad didn't want any of it to put it in his pie. I went outside to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang, remember that toy that you throw that should come back to you? But it never came back to me. And all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. Remember, ingredients are the things that you use to cook something, so all of those ingredients. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. So awful is something that's really bad. So he thought enemy pie was going to be really bad. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell. Or worse yet, what it would look like. When I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. So the boy thought enemy pie was going to smell really gross, but so far it smells good. I wonder what Dad's doing in there. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang. Remember the thing that tells you how much time you have? And Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like a plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing, but while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. All right, so that's the pie that Dad made, and that's the boy looking at the pie. So to me, that looks like a good pie, right? I would eat that compared to what Jeremy's pie was thinking about. What Jeremy was thinking about for his pie. So they look very different. So let's keep reading to find out. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to them. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. All right, so that's the pictures. And so we found out that Dad said he has to spend the whole day with him and he has to be nice for it to work. So the boy is willing to do that if it means he can get rid of his enemy. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised or shocked. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. So this is a picture of the boy, and that's Jeremy Ross. So we just asked him to go play, because Dad said that was the first step. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that since he worked so hard to make his enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win the game just to be nice. So his feelings are starting to change, right? He actually likes hanging out with Jeremy Ross, but he doesn't want to tell Dad that because he put so much effort into the pie. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. So this is a big picture of a boomerang right here. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. Remember, at the beginning of the book, he said he would never let Jeremy into his treehouse, right? And he had a sign that said his list of enemies. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in... Can we go in it? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was on the top of my enemy list. He was the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. All right, so that's his treehouse in the middle. And it says he's going to let him into his treehouse. Because remember Jeremy did all those nice things for him? He taught him how to throw a boomerang, he had him over for lunch, and he let him play on his trampoline. So the boy did the nice thing and let him up into his treehouse. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. So you can see the enemy list is right here crumpled up because he didn't want Jeremy to see it. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. All right, so you can see the checkers, the cards, and his dad at the bottom trying to yell up to the boys. So it seems like they're trying to hide and that they didn't want to go down for the enemy pie. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out that pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded, so when you nod your head, you just put it up and down. I think he thought I was just pretending. So pretending is when you make something up. So you can see his feelings have changed about Jeremy Ross, and now they made this poisonous pie that's going to get rid of his friend. So I wonder what's going to happen. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at the point that I panicked. So panicked is when you really freak out and you get nervous. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. So you see these changes of feelings, and now he's getting nervous. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. So remember, poisonous is something that can make you sick. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. So when you crumple your eyebrows, you kind of push them together. I felt relieved. So relieved is when you feel glad. I had saved his life. I was a hero. So you see Jeremy was about to eat the pie right here. He said, no, stop, don't eat it. So, because he knew, he thought that the pie was going to be poisonous, so that's why he told him not to eat it. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all that was said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. So, it doesn't seem like this enemy pie was poisonous. It seems like they're actually enjoying it and they think it's good. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or if their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get the answer, because I lost my best enemy. So if you lose your best enemy, it means he became his best friend. So you see they're laughing and they're having fun. So the end. So that was that story. So that was Enemy Pie. I hope that you guys really enjoyed that book. It's one of my favorites because I love all the pictures and the lesson that it taught me. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is, do you think Enemy Pie is real? So I said that the enemy pie did manage to get rid of the boy's enemy, but instead of doing harm, the pie brought the boy and Jeremy closer together. Because remember, the dad said that he had to spend all day with Jeremy and he had to be kind to him. So his point was for them to realize that they weren't so different after all and that they were going to be good friends, right? And at the beginning of the story, the boy said, nope, Jeremy is my enemy, and by the end, they were best friends. So the enemy pie brought them together. So the turn and talk question that I have created for you guys today is, what lesson did you learn from this book, and how did it teach you something that you can include in your real life? All right, so you can either comment in this post on Class Dojo, or you can share it with a family member. So what lesson did you learn from the book? So I'll give you a second to do that. So I said that it taught me about the importance of friendship. All right, so it means that you don't jump to conclusions about people. So if you've ever heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, it means you need to get to know somebody and spend time with them before you decide if you want to be their friend. The next thing it taught me is how important it is to be kind to everyone. So if you don't like somebody, you're not going to just give them poisonous pie, that way they're out of your hair, as the boy said. No, it's important to be kind to everyone and get to know them. The last thing it taught me is how to handle conflict. So conflict is when you disagree or you're in an argument about something. So Jeremy and the boy were in sort of a conflict because they didn't like each other. But it's important that we spend time and get to know others. And it's important to not poison people or do something to get rid of them, right? You just say, nope, I think we're going to be friends, or no, I don't think we're going to be friends, right? So you don't want to give somebody poisonous pie just because you don't like them. So the last thing I have for us is an extension activity. So this you can add on if you really want to do it. So I think it's fun. I did it. The prompt is, instead of a pie to get rid of our enemies, you will now create a pie that will help you make new friends. So I want you to make your own friendship pie. So you're going to write down the things or ingredients you look for in your friends. All right, so what are some qualities or characteristics that you look for in your friends? And those will be the ingredients of your pie. So some of the qualities that I look for in my friends is I want them to be trustworthy. I want them to be honest. I want them to be loyal. And I like them to be funny. I like to laugh with my friends and to have a good time. So those are some characteristics that I look for in my friends. So you can make a list of the qualities or ingredients that you would include in your pie on what you think your friends should be like. And if you want, you can even make your own pie for the fun of it. All right, so thank you so much for listening, and I hope you guys enjoyed this book. Take care, and I'll see you soon.